Many of you may have heard of or even played the game Akinator, where a little floating genie asks a series of yes or no questions to eventually guess any person, fictional or real, who you have in mind. The same concept of this game is applicable in biology to help classify species of animals such as birds. An iOS Android app called Merlin Bird does just that by asking a series of questions in order to help birdwatchers identify birds on the go. All users have to do is answer 5 questions: where they saw the bird, when they saw it, how big it was, and what color it was, as well as what it was doing. Today, we will go through an example explaining how this might work using if-else statements to identify the type of imaginary monster in a set of creatures we have created. Here's our little group of monsters.
So let's say that these monsters lived on a planet and we wanted to create a guide for tourists who are coming to this planet to be able to tell what species of monster they were looking at. So here I have some of the attributes of the monsters that we've discussed. So the monster Gabriel has 2 eyes and is green, Timmy has 1 eye and is red, Wilbur has 1 eye and is blue, and Stan has 2 eyes and is yellow. So we could just hand somebody a long list like this, but that might not be very helpful if there were a lot more species on that list. So instead, we can use if-else statements, which are a type of conditional statements. So there's if statements, there are else statements, Elif statements, while statements, and so on. So we can use these conditionals to create an interactive tool that will help the tourist determine what kind of species of monster they are looking at. So let's talk for a second about if, else, and elif. We're not going to talk about while. So we can think of if statements in this way. So you would say, if this thing is true, then do this other thing. So for instance, if the monster has 2 eyes, then it is either Gabriel or Stan. So we can actually use if statements along with else statements to construct a tree that allows the user to figure out what kind of monster they are looking at. So else statements are like if statements, except with else statements, else statements follow if statements. So if the monster has 2 eyes, then it is either Gabriel or Stan. Else means that the monster does not have 2 eyes. And then that would mean that if the monster didn't have 2 eyes, that it would be Wilbur or Timmy, because Wilbur and Timmy both have 1 eye. So if gives us a condition, and if that condition turns out not to be true, then we go to the else statement. Another kind of statement that we can use is an elif statement. So let's say we have an if statement. So if the monster has 2 eyes, then it is either Gabriel or Stan. But let's say that's not true. Elif, the monster, has 1 eye and is blue, it is Wilbur, right? Okay, and we can even finish that off with an else statement right here. Else, the monster is Timmy. Okay, so here we go through an if statement. If the monster has 2 eyes, then it is either Gabriel or Stan, right? So if it's true, either Gabriel or Stan, and our code stops running. Then we go to our next thing, right? If this line doesn't run, then we're going to go to our next line, because that's not true. So is this true? Elif, the monster has 1 eye. Okay, so let's say it's true, then we would be done. But let's say it's not true. If it's not true, we finally go to our else statement. Else, the monster is Timmy. And that means that the monster is Timmy. Let's write some actual code for this. So we're using Python, which is a pretty readable language, but the way that you write it isn't exactly how I wrote it here. So let's walk through that. So we are first going to start by setting up a variable. So a variable is an object in Python and also in other coding languages that helps us to store information. So I'm thinking about the differences between our different monsters. And one of the large differences are the number of eyes they have. So I'm going to ask the user, our tourist, to tell us the number of eyes that the creature has. So we're going to first set up a variable, number of eyes, that's our variable, and we're going to set it as the input of the user. So the input of the user in response to this statement. How many eyes does the monster have? So let's just run this for a second so you can see what happens when we ask for number of eyes. How many eyes does the monster have? My program asks. Let's say 2. Okay, so right now it just has taken in that information. 2 is set equal to number of eyes. I can also print, let's just see what would happen if I printed number of eyes, my variable number of eyes. Print number of eyes. So let's say 2 again. It's going to print number of eyes. We get 2. So I don't actually want to print number of eyes though for my program. So if number of eyes equals, let's say 2, let's just say print yay, just to show you how this statement would work. Print yay. So let's run this code again. How many eyes does the monster have? 2. And now we've printed yay. So this is how an if statement would work, but we don't want our code to say yay. So we know the number of eyes, and if it's 2, then we have 2 options. Actually, we have Gabriel. Gabriel has 2 eyes, and we have Stan. Stan has 2 eyes. So what's the difference between Gabriel and Stan? Well, Gabriel is green and Stan is yellow. So we can actually reproduce what we did above with number of eyes with a new variable under our if statement. So we can say color. We're going to say color gets an input. Is the monster green or yellow? Please type green or yellow. Okay, if the color equals to green, then we can print the monster is, well, let's see. Trying to remember, it's Gabriel. The monster is Gabriel. Okay, so let's just run this really quickly to see what happens. Okay, so how many eyes does the monster, this green monster that we're looking at, have? Well, it looks like it has 2. Okay. And is this monster green or yellow? It's green. And so now we know the monster is Gabriel. Okay, and we could actually put in some else statements now. So one important thing is that in Python, we do things by indentation. We need to make sure that the else statement that we write for our if statement has the same amount of indentation in order for it to work. So for the interest of time here, I've put in the else statements. So just a reminder, the else statements tell us what to do if the if statement is not true. And here we are running the program, looking to figure out what monster we're looking at.
This algorithm is useful because it can help us identify subjects out of a group of related things by going from a broad to more specific category using the if-else statements. This can be applicable in identifying things other than imaginary monsters we make up. For example, this code works similarly in a general sense to how programs work in identifying stages of cancer through inputting symptoms, rather than characteristics of small fuzzy monsters. The limits are boundless for what biohealth CS is capable of accomplishing.